Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for November 14th, 2017. On today's show, we're going to be talking about a lot of news, including Justice League reshoots, the Rotten Tomatoes score, and Ben Affleck's future as Batman. We'll talk about plans or possible no plans for a theatrical run for Martin Scorsese's Netflix film, adaptations of Super Mario Brothers, Are You Afraid of the Dark, Get Out's surprising Golden Globes category, Disney loses their Pinocchio director, and Ben talks to Paul Scheer about his Galaxy Quest TV series, and Paul joins in on conversations we've had on this podcast. This is Peter Soda, and joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film senior writer Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's up?
And writer Hoai-Tran Bui. How's it going?
Good. Hi, everyone.
We have a lot to talk about, so we should just jump in. This is probably like the longest list of news that we've had in quite some time. We're going to start this off with Paul Scheer, though. You got to talk to Paul Scheer for The Disaster Artist?
I did, yes. So he plays a part in The Disaster Artist, and that full interview will come a little bit later on. But last August, we learned that Paul is going to be writing a TV adaptation of Galaxy Quest, the 1999 sci-fi comedy, and he's going to be doing that for Amazon. So I asked him about whether he could give us some more information on that, and I actually have the clip for you guys, so we'll just play that right now.
I have two things I want to say to your podcast.
Yes.
All right. Number one, the spoiler culture argument that was going on for such a long time. I am so confused at what you... Because, my idea, I feel like there needs to be a better definition of what spoiler culture is. Because, I agree. I don't want someone to tell me that, and bleep this out if this is a spoiler, that Matt Damon's in Thor. That's a spoiler, right? That is a fun treat for me to see in the movie. Yeah. But me knowing that the Hulk is in Thor, that's not a spoiler for me. I think there's variations of spoiler culture, and I was and there's two sides. I don't want to know who Ray's parents are, but I don't mind seeing a porg. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like
definitely levels.
Yeah, and I feel like that's so whenever I hear spoiler, a spoiler is something that again, you guys talked about on the podcast, knowing that Bruce Willis is dead at the end of Sixth Sense, that's a spoiler. That is a spoiler. Yeah. That is a spoiler. It just is. You can't get around that. And the other thing that I want to talk about was I have a lot of thoughts on who could run this new Star Wars show too. But I think Dave Filoni would be amazing just because of Rebels. But I feel like everybody you guys brought up, we're all working. It's but to me, this is what I was going to say is make room for the next Sam Esmail, make room for the, all these people that you reference, they all popped out of nowhere. Right. It wasn't Sam Esmail's doing Mr. Robot. Yeah. It wasn't, and I think that hopefully will be the person that takes Star Wars to the next level.
Whoever's directing this year's Sundance comedy or something.
Yeah, exactly. You never know. Yeah. Because those are the people that we're most excited about. The people ultimately who come in from nowhere and who is that?
Yeah.
So we'd heard from our own sources previously that the show was looking to mix an older cast with a new one, but this is the first sort of official confirmation of that. He does talk about how this is going to be basically a continuation of the movie, so that's pretty cool too. And he's looking at it as a serialized story. That's also really nice to hear. We're not entirely sure if the original cast, Tim Allen, Sigourney Weaver, Tony Shalhoub, Sam Rockwell, and Daryl Mitchell will be coming back, but it seems like that's the intention.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody is signed up at this point, and as he mentioned, the show is still a little bit far. It's going to be a little while before we actually get to see it, but. And the other thing that I really liked, that he mentioned there was the concept of the drastically, changing fan culture and how that is going to be, directly addressed in the show, which sounds really interesting. Peter, what do you think?
I honestly, I think that's probably one of the biggest changes since that Galaxy Quest movie actually came out is, internet has really changed the fan culture. Back then it was you had to go to these conventions to kind of hang out with, groups of people that loved the thing you love. But now, we just get online and we bitterly complain about it from afar, under pseudonyms. I know Paul has said on Twitter that there's actually going to be a slash film reporter in the pilot episode. I'm not sure if that will actually end up happening. He's a big fan of slash film. He mentioned the podcast in your interview, right?
Yeah, he listens to the podcast every day, so he's probably listening now. Hey, Paul, how's it going? And he actually wanted to, I guess, directly address us, the podcast, and maybe the listeners as well, and sort of chime in with some comments about conversations that we've had previously. So I'll drop that clip in right now as well.
I have two things I want to say to your podcast.
Yes.
All right. Number one, the spoiler culture argument that was going on for such a long time. I am so confused at what you... Because, like, my idea, like... I feel like there needs to be a better definition of what spoiler culture is. Because, like, I agree. Like, I don't want someone to tell me that, and bleep this out if this is a spoiler, that Matt Damon's in Thor. That's a spoiler, right? That is a fun treat for me to see in the movie.
Yeah.
But me knowing that the Hulk is in Thor, that's not a spoiler for me. Like, I think there's, like, variations of spoiler culture, and I was like, and there's two sides. Like, I don't want to know who Ray's parents are, but I don't mind seeing a porg. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I feel like
definitely levels.
Yeah, and I feel like that's like so. Whenever I hear spoiler, like a spoiler is something that affect, like, you know, again, like you guys talked about on the podcast, like knowing that Bruce Willis is dead at the end of Sixth Sense, like that's a spoiler. That is a spoiler. That is a spoiler. It just is. Like you can't get around that. And the other thing that I want to talk about was I have a lot of thoughts on who could run this new Star Wars show too, but I think Dave Filoni would be amazing just because of Rebels. But I feel like everybody you guys brought up, we're all working. Like it was so.
Yeah,
it's. But to me, this is what I was going to say is like make room for the next Sam Esmail. Make room for all these people that you reference. They all popped out of nowhere. Right. It wasn't like, oh, Sam Esmail's doing Mr. Robot. Yeah. Like it wasn't, And I think that will be hopefully will be the person that takes Star Wars to the next level.
Whoever's directing this year's Sundance comedy or something.
Yeah, exactly. You never know. Yeah, because it's like those are the people that we're most excited about. Like the people ultimately who come in from nowhere and like, oh, who is that?
Yeah.
Sorry, that was my...
That's great. Thanks, man. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
That is amazing, by the way. I love it that Paul Scheer listens to the show. I love it that, like, someone I'm a fan of is a big fan of the stuff that we do on the site. I think he's right. I think there needs to be a better definition of what is a spoiler, but I think defining a spoiler is different in so many people's point of views. Some people consider anything, even the plot synopsis that's, on IMDb or like, the trailer is a spoiler. So it's hard to define there. But let's talk about Star Wars for a second, because you guys were not on this Star Wars podcast. Do you guys have any suggestions on who should direct a Star Wars TV show, a live action TV show?
I listened to that episode, and I was, I noticed that you guys were trying to come up with a potential female showrunner, and I think somebody that might be able to fit in that realm would be Moira Walley-Beckett, who was a producer and writer on Breaking Bad. She wrote Ozymandias, which I think is the best episode of Breaking Bad. It's the one that Rian Johnson directed, like right near the very end of the show. It was like the second to last episode or something. A tremendous hour of TV, like one of the greatest things I've ever seen. She also wrote for this NBC show called Reigns that starred Jeff Goldblum back in 2007 that only ran for one season, but I liked it a lot before it got canceled. And she's created TV shows before. She created Flesh and Bone and with an E. So I think she definitely has the experience and the chops to maybe step into that world. Breaking Bad, that's got to have a lot of cultural cachet. So I think she might be able to do it.
In that Rian Johnson connection, obviously, he could probably offer a recommendation to KK for who it is. I was thinking after the podcast of other women. It's really tough because I feel like as a site, one of our core values is pushing diversity, and we want to put. And it's very hard to find a female filmmaker. Showrunner who has experience, who isn't like, a newbie, that I think could fit this bill. I was thinking Michelle McLaren, but she doesn't quite fit. I don't think I somehow think that she wouldn't want to do a Star Wars TV show.
Actually, I have a suggestion. I just thought of one. So Marty Noxon, who used to work on Buffy the Vampire Slayer and basically ran the show for season 6 and went on to create Unreal and several other shows that are on Lifetime right now. She's really talented, and I think she would fit in well with sort of that sci-fi realm because she's worked so often with Joss Whedon. Jane Espenson, too. She's more commonly a writer, but she's worked on Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Once Upon a Time. So I think those could be good choices.
Yeah, for sure.
I knew you guys could bring some names to the stable. What do you guys think of Dave Filoni as live-action director for this TV show? Any thoughts?
I mean, I haven't seen any of Rebels yet. I know I'm like woefully far behind on that, but from everything that I've heard in every interview that I've ever read with him, or anytime I've ever seen him in anything, he seems like the guy who is probably the closest to Star Wars royalty outside of George Lucas as there is. Like, he is the guy who holds the secrets to all, this storytelling. He like studied under Lucas, and he knows that world better than just about anybody. So I think he's a pretty good choice for that that position if it's something that he's interested in.
I feel like we need to create a voicemail that just Paul Scheer has the number to. He is the only person who has the number. And he can call in and leave a message, and when needed, we will bring it up on the podcast. If Paul is game, I will create that number. But let's move on to Justice League, because there's a lot of Justice League news. Justice League reshoots, we've talked about it quite a bit. We now know how much of the finished movie makes up for these reshoots by Joss Whedon. Ben, what do we know?
Yes, producer Charles Roven, who has produced every live-action Batman movie since Batman Begins, says that Whedon filmed between 15 to 20% of what we see in the final cut of Justice League. His exact quote is, "The goal is to make sure when you're watching the movie, it all feels cohesive. The imprint that Joss had, some aspect of it is going to come out in the direction, but the actors are already pretty much down the road on their arcs. Let's just say 80-85% of the movie is what was originally shot. There's only so much you can do with the other 15 to 20% of the movie." So, yeah. Peter, you've actually seen Justice League. I think I'm seeing it at the screening tomorrow night. I can't really speak too much to what the final film feels like, but I'm sure you can. What did you think about that?
I mean, you can definitely see Whedon's hands on it, but I do think some people, I've said this before, I think some people will think that some stuff was Whedon and it was actually, Zack Snyder, stuff I saw on set when I was in London. I will say that, even though maybe only 15-20% of this movie was, done by Joss Whedon, there's a reported, unconfirmed 50 minutes of movie that were edited out that were shot by Zack Snyder. So, it's all about the edit. Reshoots isn't just about the actual footage they shoot. It's also about what they choose to exclude as well. Mm-hmm. I did see the movie again last night for the second time. I know it's not out, guys, but I was invited to the premiere in Hollywood, and I will say this: I liked it better a second time. I'm not sure critics will dig this movie. It has a lot of plot problems and villain problems, but I think if you can go in there. I'm trying to think of a way of saying it. If you can go in there not caring about the plot or the villain, if you can go in there just to hang out with these people, these characters, the characters are fun, and I don't know. I had a fun time. I'm not saying it's a great movie, but I think it's course correcting this franchise, this cinematic universe into the right direction. But speaking of which. The Rotten Tomatoes score for this movie will not be, we will not find that out until the day before the release. There's some controversy around this. HT, what's going on?
So the Justice League Rotten Tomatoes score, their tomato meter, has been pushed back to be revealed on Thursday, November 16th at 12:01 a.m. EST, which is a day before the movie's release on November 17th. So it's going to be revealed in conjunction with Rotten Tomatoes' new Facebook show, See It, Skip It, which was premiered earlier this month. So there's been some talk around this sort of topic because Warner Brothers is a minority shareholder in Fandango, which is Rotten Tomatoes' parent company, but there doesn't seem to be at least any sort of correlation between that. The See It, Skip It show has pushed back a movie's tomato meter rating before, and this was with Bad Moms, which was released last week. And they did that because the review embargo date lined up with the date of their when their Facebook show airs. So this was just the movie that they chose to highlight on their show, and Justice League is likely not some part of some greater conspiracy to tamp down on bad reviews against the film. However, it is... I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, it just seems weird. Even if there isn't conspiracy theory, like, I feel like if I was Rotten Tomatoes, I would kind of, like, it doesn't make sense to do this. We're owned by Warner Brothers. Will this look bad?
Definitely does not look good.
Yeah. It looks shady. Even if it isn't shady, it looks shady. And all for what? For purposes of promoting their web series?
Yeah, it's pretty bad. It's not great optics, especially considering sort of the how Rotten Tomatoes is involved in conversations about the failing box office or DC Comics fans kind of ganging up on it whenever a DC comic movie has a bad tomato meter score. But it comes also after a really late review embargo for the movie, which is only 2 days before the movie is revealed, which is alarmingly close for a wide release like Justice League. So it kind of seems like the studio itself doesn't have a huge stock in or huge trust in how well Justice League will do, even though we've seen with social media reaction that it has kind of positive feedback. People don't hate it. It's a good, fun, enjoyable movie for the most part. So it seems a little bit strange that they're really playing things close to the chest for this movie, and this Rotten Tomatoes score just kind of is another cherry on top of this strange environment that's surrounding Justice League.
Also in the news is Ben Affleck is talking more and more about the future of Batman. I feel like if I was Ben Affleck and people kept on asking me these Batman questions, I would just have a definitive yes or no. But the fact that he is, saying all these things, it seems a little sketch. Ben, what is he saying this time?
Yes, in a new interview with USA Today, Ben Affleck revealed that he has not fully committed to playing Batman in Matt Reeves' upcoming Batman standalone movie that he's developing. So the quote from USA Today is, "The new Batman movie being developed by Matt Reeves is, quote, something I'm contemplating," says Affleck, who originally was tapped to direct. Quote, "You don't do it forever, so I want to find a graceful and cool way to segue out of it." End quote. So, yeah, I mean, Peter, again, you're the only one of us here who's seen Justice League. Did it seem like he was sleepwalking his way through that movie, or did he seem engaged with that character? Based on what Ben Affleck does in that film, what does it look like? What do you think about the future of him playing Batman again?
Well, I think Batman in Justice League plays a great foil. He plays a great straight man side by side with Aquaman or the Flash or even, Wonder Woman, who is, full of hope. I feel like, it's not Nolan's Batman, but I don't know. I like Ben Affleck as Batman, but at the same time, I don't think he's going to be in Matt Reeves' Batman. Or if he is, I think he will be killed off.
Interesting.
I mean, they no spoilers for Justice League, but I think it's kind of made clear in Justice League that he's getting older. I mean, it's made clear in Batman vs Superman as well that he's kind of like getting older in this role of this vigilante. This isn't like his early days as Gotham's hero. So maybe that's the way to do it. Maybe a Batman Beyond kind of spin-off, or not spin-off, but next chapter to this franchise. I don't know.
Yeah.
I would welcome that completely.
Yeah. But let's move on from Justice League and the DCEU, and let's go to Netflix. They're distributing Martin Scorsese's next film, The Irishman. Is it going to hit theaters? HT, what do we know?
Well, that's the question, see. So Martin Scorsese's The Irishman is a movie that has long been gestating and been shopped around Hollywood because of its incredibly hefty price tag. The director wanted to use de-aging technology to show Robert De Niro and Al Pacino's characters throughout the stages of their lives. So this would mean an extensive use of the de-aging technology that we haven't seen since perhaps like The Curious Cage of Benjamin Button. And while the technology now is much more advanced than even with that film, it would be very costly. We're looking at more than $100 million for the production, maybe $125 million in a ballpark, according to a producer for the film. So it could go much higher, considering that they have only just started shooting, and Netflix was the only sort of studio that was willing to back that costly production budget, and Scorsese was very glad to commit to that because he needed a studio that would back that huge ballooning price. So he reportedly made a deal with Netflix based on the condition that The Irishman would receive a 2019 theatrical release, and that it would be in theaters for 2 weeks, which would qualify it for an Oscar contention. However, it seems that Netflix's film division has not yet confirmed a theatrical release at all for The Irishman. So it's being made and it's currently shooting at the moment, but there is no confirmation that it will hit theaters.
Well, to be clear, that awards run just needs to be in like one theater in New York and LA to qualify. And Netflix notoriously in the past has not wanted to do anything other than day and date, which means, it being in theaters at the same time that it's on the streaming service. So it'll be interesting to see if they do anything wide or if they do anything early for this film.
Yeah, they have a very tense relationship with theaters, it seems, because they're very much of the opinion, and they seem to want to stick to their mission statement of streaming first, theater second. But because of that, they've kind of alienated a lot of the film festival and award festival circuit. So it's something that I think they'll have to take into account, especially for Martin Scorsese, who is such a legendary filmmaker and who is definitely part of that awards circuit, no matter what film he does.
I don't think anybody's going to turn this down. If Netflix went to the Man Chinese Theater and was like, we want to put this in theaters for a week, are you going to turn Martin Scorsese's movie down? No. Do you know what I mean? It's going to be there.
And also Netflix just decided to put Mudbound, which is a movie that played at this year's Sundance Film Festival, and they acquired it. That movie, I think, is coming out this coming Friday, November 17th. So they decided to put Mudbound in a limited theatrical release in 15 theaters or something this Friday. So I can't imagine that they would give a film like that a theatrical release. I mean, no offense to Mudbound, but you know what I mean? Like with a Martin Scorsese movie, something that, has all eyes of the whole industry on it because of everybody that's involved. I can't imagine that they wouldn't just slip it into a few theaters here and there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Speaking of awards, I want to talk about Get Out, because Get Out is obviously going to be one of the films that a lot of people are going to be talking about this award season. And as it turns out, the Golden Globes are considering nominating it as a comedy. Ben, why does this keep on happening?
I don't know. Chris Tapley, who works for Variety, he's an awards editor over there, tweeted today that the Hollywood Foreign Press Association met today to determine the categories, and Get Out is officially going to be in the comedy section. So this obviously sort of calls to mind a recent quote-unquote controversy at the Golden Globes where they put Ridley Scott's The Martian in the Best Comedy or Musical category. That movie was very clearly a drama that happened to be funny. Get Out, to me, is very clearly a horror satire that happens to be funny, but I guess the Golden Globes, we have this conversation every year they come around. It's basically just a sort of drunken excuse to get famous people to, show up in this room and rub shoulders with the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. So it's not too surprising that they're looking to, A, get this movie involved in the awards conversation, because it does deserve that. But then B, get all of the people involved with the film to this award show just to sort of, raise the profile of the Golden Globes as well, because everybody loves Get Out. It's still, even though it came out early this year, it's still a movie that people are talking about. So this whole category thing is pretty ridiculous. But yeah, this seems to be the latest entry in that category.
Also in the news, sorry to fast forward, folks, but we have a lot to get to today. Also in the news that Super Mario Brothers, the Nintendo video game, might actually become an animated movie from the studio that brought you Despicable Me, and that's Illumination Entertainment. The Wall Street Journal reports that people with knowledge of the discussions say that Nintendo and Illumination are close to signing an agreement that would bring Mario to theaters. This is big news. Apparently, one of the complications in this negotiation is that Nintendo wants to be a part of the creative process in a way that video game companies aren't normally in movies. And, Miyamoto, who's the guy that created Mario and Donkey Kong, he is being part of these talks, and he wants to be a producer on the movie alongside Chris Meledandri, who runs Illumination. Obviously, there was that Super Mario Brothers movie, I think in the 80s, early 90s, something like that. That was pretty horrible. We have an article
93.
on 93. Yeah, we have an article on the site from Blake Harris that details the making of that movie from his book Console Wars, which is a great book that you should check out. Obviously, Nintendo does not want a repeat of that. They want to keep control of their character, but. I'm a fan of Super Mario Brothers. I'm not a huge video game fan, but it occurs to me, especially recently while I'm watching my girlfriend Kitra play Super Mario Odyssey, that there really isn't too much of a storyline with these Mario Brothers games, and in so much as it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. There's basically...
I think that's an understatement. There is no story.
Yeah, so what do you guys think? What could a Super Mario Brothers movie even be?
Well, I think they have free reign to do whatever they want with it. We've seen the Emoji Movie and the Angry Birds movie make stories out of apps or literal just facial emotions. So Super Mario Brothers, they could really just go crazy and do like a trippy fever dream of a movie, which I would really enjoy if they went there. But I have no idea. Yeah, it's very strange that you have a plumber saving a princess from a castle run by a dragon, I think, or evil turtle, one of the two. So it's there's so many directions you could do with that.
Yeah, I would love to see them make, 10 or 15 Mario Brothers movies over the next 15 or 20 years and have a different filmmaker come in and do a completely different style of movie for each one. Sort of like you're talking about, Peter, like there's no real cohesive narrative, to the franchise as a whole. Lean into that. Just go crazy and let, different people come and make different Mario movies in different genres, sort of like how, Marvel's doing different, genre storytelling within the superhero sort of structure. Just go for that in a Mario Brothers movie. Get like an animated version, get like a stop motion version. Just go crazy. I don't know.
And I also wonder, do you think that this is going to be the story of Mario, a plumber that gets sucked into this world and trying to save the princess? Or do you think this could possibly be like a Wreck-It Ralph style, kind of like breaking the fourth wall of, the guys in a video game kind of thing? I don't know.
That would be fun. I would like to watch that.
It should also be mentioned that Universal Studios, who they distribute the Illumination Entertainment movies. They have a deal to bring Nintendo to their theme parks, the first being Japan, and then Orlando and Hollywood, and Mario is going to be one of those attractions. So it makes sense for them to want to, make Mario movies. I'm just not sure what those movies are going to look like. But let's move on from that to Are You Afraid of the Dark? I know this is a TV show I used to watch on, what was it,
Nickelodeon.
Yeah, but I think it was part of their something block. I forget
was
what
it
it's called.
Snick or something?
Maybe it was Snick, yeah. Anyways, there's a movie in the works with the screenwriter of it. HT, what do you know?
So an Are You Afraid of the Dark movie is in the works at Paramount Players, which is a new division of Paramount Pictures. It screenwriter Gary Dauberman is going to be penning the movie, and that's the only information we know for now. But it seems like it's part of the new trend of putting the nostalgia goggles on and revisiting some of the genre hits of our childhood. So I never actually watched Are You Afraid of the Dark as a kid because I did not have cable, but I think it would be a really great way to play into the Stranger Things and It crowd, and hopefully will be more of a success than the similarly nostalgia-fueled movies like Power Rangers or Goosebumps.
See, I was a fan of the TV show, and I think this is probably the wrong way of going about it. I know Paramount owns Nickelodeon. I think they should bring this back as a TV series. Like, the great thing about this is it was an anthology show, so it's, different stories every week, it's people telling stories around a campfire, basically. And I think that would be the appeal of it for me is, seeing it as an anthology series again, and having the screenwriter of it seems a little weird. But Ben, do you have any thoughts on this?
I didn't really watch the show growing up or anything. I'm just wondering about the anthology thing. I think a movie, I don't know, it's tough because like what network would Paramount put this on? If I think they just rebranded what was it, Spike TV into the Paramount Network actually, so maybe they would put it on that. But it seems like we've been talking a lot about Peak TV in the past few weeks. I feel like a show like this might just sort of disappear into the ether and not really make that much of a splash. But as a movie, at least, it would have a lot more focused concentration on it, I think. So I don't know. It's hard to say because we don't really know anything about what Dauberman is planning on doing with this. If it's going to be, like multiple stories that sort of interlink, or if it's just one continuous story, or how he's going to structure it, what it's going to look like. But yeah, it's tough to say at this stage.
Yeah. And last week we had news that Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio is no longer happening. This week we are learning by the tracking board that Sam Mendes, who was in talks to make a live-action Pinocchio for Disney, from a screenplay by Chris Weitz, who won an Oscar for About a Boy, he is no longer attached to make this movie. Doesn't mean that Disney isn't going to find someone to replace them. They probably are. Disney seems dead set on, live action, quote unquote, remakes of all their animated classics. I was never really, attached to the idea of a live action Pinocchio movie, or even Sam Mendes doing the live action Pinocchio movie. Do you guys have any thoughts on who should replace him?
Man, that's a tough one.
I'm still sad about the Guillermo del Toro Pinocchio movie, so he would be my choice.
Yeah, and Sam Mendes actually sounds like, he can really lean into, melancholy tones as a filmmaker, and I think that's a pretty decent match with Pinocchio. So it's sort of a shame that he is parting ways here, because I think he could have done something a little bit more interesting than what we've seen in previous Disney live-action adaptations, which a lot of them have just been sort of almost carbon copies of the animated versions. I feel like Mendes could have brought a stylistic influence to it that would have been something a little bit more unique. I don't know, Peter. Do you have any suggestions for who could take on a live action Pinocchio movie?
I don't know. Maybe Jon Favreau, because maybe Jon Favreau has to make all these Disney animated live action adaptations. I don't have a good suggestion. Maybe it's because I'm not excited about a live action Pinocchio movie. I wasn't even excited about the one that was in the works at Warner Brothers. It might still be in the works. Warner Brothers. Robert Downey Jr. was going to star, and Paul Thomas Anderson was being courted to direct. And even with Paul Thomas Anderson,
fancy.
Yeah, even with Paul Thomas Anderson, do you want to see a Pinocchio movie directed by Paul Thomas Anderson?
I mean, just to see what that looks like.
Yeah.
But
that might go into interesting places. So who knows? If it ever came about, but I kind of doubt it would.
Yeah, I doubt that they're going to give him the creative control that he demands, rightfully so. That does it for today's edition of Slash Film Daily. You can find more of me at Slash Film. You can find more of HT at Hoai-Tran Bui on Twitter. You can find more of Ben at Ben Pearson on Twitter. You can find all the articles we talked about on slashfilm.com and linked in the show notes. You can find this podcast published every day or every weekday on iTunes, Google Play, Overcast, all the popular podcast apps. Please go to iTunes, give us a rating, give us a review. That helps us out quite a bit, and we will see you tomorrow.